The morning of May 29, 1453, rose over the Bosphorus with an unnatural silence. Smoke hung in the air like a shroud. The city that had stood for more than 1,000 years, the last heartbeat of the Roman Empire, was breathing its final breaths. Men stood on the battered walls of Constantinople, exhausted, bruised, and covered in the dust of collapsing stone. Inside the city, children clung to their mothers, monks sang ancient hymns, and soldiers whispered prayers they had not spoken in years. And on the other side of the battlefield, a 21-year-old sultan prepared to carve his name into history. Today, he whispered to himself, Rome falls. But inside the walls, another man, older, battered, determined, strapped on his armor for the last time. Emperor Constantine XI knew he would not survive the day. But he hoped, perhaps the city might. If this is the end, he thought, let it be worthy of our ancestors. By 1453, Constantinople was no longer an empire, only a memory of one. Once the shining capital of the world, now reduced to a starving city of 50,000 souls, cut off from allies, surrounded by enemies, and betrayed by the very powers who swore to protect it. Constantine XI had inherited more problems than soldiers. Inside the city, the political tensions were suffocating, Greek nobles who resented the emperor's union with the Catholic Church. Priests accusing each other of heresy. Latin mercenaries distrusted by Greek citizens. Nobles who openly said, better the sultan's turban than the cardinal's hat. Constantine often stood alone in his council room, listening to arguments from men too proud to see how close death truly was. If they could hear the cannons, he thought bitterly, they would argue less. Outside the walls, the cannons were indeed speaking. Across the field, Sultan Mehmed II rode through the Ottoman camp, a young man with a mind far older than his years. European rulers mocked him as the child sultan. They said he was untested, emotional, impulsive. They had no idea who they were dealing with. Mehmed had spent years studying Roman history, Byzantine strategy, engineering, siegecraft. He knew every weak point of the walls. Every political division inside the city. Every lie the Europeans told when they promised aid soon. And for him, Constantinople was not just a conquest. It was destiny. If I fail, he thought, I will be remembered as a boy. If I succeed, the world will call me Caesar. Behind him marched an army the world had rarely seen, janissaries, elite soldiers, disciplined and fearless. Anatolian infantry. Cavalry. Engineers and sappers, and a fleet stretching across the horizon. But the true weapon was something else. A cannon so massive that it shook the earth when it fired. The creation of Urban, a brilliant Hungarian engineer whom the Byzantines had rejected because they could not pay him. Let them regret it, Mehmed told him. Urban bowed. He built the greatest gun the medieval world would ever know. When the great bombard fired its first shot, it echoed through every church and market of Constantinople. Walls that had withstood Persians, Arabs, Avars, Rus, Bulgarians, now cracked under the thunder of gunpowder. Each impact tore more stone from the ancient Theodosian walls. Inside the city, Giustiniani, the Genoese commander, ran from breach to breach, shouting orders, lifting stones with his bare hands, barking commands with a voice that held the line together. Constantine watched him work and felt a surge of gratitude. If only I had 10 men like him. But there was only one Giustiniani. And tens of thousands of Ottomans. The siege dragged on. Stress built like pressure inside a sealed chamber. Bread was rationed. Water wells ran low. Corpses lay unburied because men were too exhausted to perform funerals. In dim candlelight, priests argued over whether God had abandoned the city. Merchants hid their gold. Mothers sewed scraps of metal into their children's clothes, hoping it might protect them from arrows. Even nobles felt fear. Grand Duke Lucas Notara stared from his window at the burning fields and whispered, perhaps this is justice for our sins. He did not yet know the personal tragedy that awaited him. Meanwhile, the Ottoman camp was not united either. Senior Vizier Halil Pasha begged Mehmed to end the siege. The walls are too strong, he warned. Your father failed. Your grandfather failed. But Mehmed's eyes burned with a different fire. "My father was a great man," he said quietly. "But I will do what he could not." Another advisor, Zaganos Pasha, leaned close. "If you retreat now, the throne will not be safe when you return." The word struck deeper than any blade. Mehmed made his decision. There would be no retreat. No surrender. Only victory or death. The Golden Horn was Constantinople's last protection. A massive iron chain blocked the harbor, no ship could pass. So Mehmed did something no general in history had done on such a scale. He moved his entire fleet over a hill. At night. Silently. With thousands of soldiers dragging ships across greased wooden beams, the sound muffled with cloth. When the first sunlight hit the harbor, the defenders froze. Ottoman ships were already inside the Golden Horn, behind the chain. Women screamed. Men crossed themselves. Monks declared it a miracle of the devil. Constantine stared at the ships and felt something he had not felt since the siege began: fear. The last door has opened. The arrival of the Ottoman fleet inside the Golden Horn changed everything. Now the defenders had to watch both the land walls and the sea walls. Their forces were already stretched thin, and now they were impossibly divided. Constantine walked the ramparts in silence, listening to the murmur of frightened citizens and exhausted soldiers. Oil lamps flickered in the cold wind. If the people break before the walls do, he thought, then the walls will not matter. But outside the walls, Mehmed was preparing something worse than fear. He ordered nighttime bombardments, the shock of cannon fire echoing across the sleeping city, depriving defenders of rest, pushing them closer to collapse. The stone of the Theodosian walls groaned like a wounded beast. Inside the city, entire families huddled together as dust rained from ceilings. Children cried. Priests chanted. Mothers whispered comforting lies. Giustiniani barely slept, walking with a limp as he inspected cracks in the walls. "We are holding," he told his men. But privately, he feared the walls could not survive another week. After weeks of bombardment, the inevitable happened. A massive section of the land walls collapsed. The ground trembled. Dust blinded defenders. Stones rolled like thunder. Ottoman troops charged immediately, thousands rushing into the breach. Giustiniani was there first. Sword drawn, shouting orders. Constantine hurried to join him, armor clattering as he ran. The emperor and the Genoese commander stood shoulder to shoulder, pushing ladders away, blocking enemies, filling cracks with barrels and debris. For a moment, the two men, one a foreign mercenary, one the last emperor of Rome, fought like brothers. And they held. But the cannons fired again. The second bombardment sent shards of stone flying like arrows. One strike hit Giustiniani in the chest, crushing his armor and tearing into his ribs. He fell to one knee. Soldiers gasped. Some moved to carry him away. "No," he shouted through clenched teeth. "I stand until the city stands." But the wound was fatal. Blood pooled beneath him. Constantine rushed to him, gripping his shoulders. "Stay with me, Giovanni." Giustiniani whispered back, "If I die here, the men will break. If I leave, we all will." It was the cruelest truth of the siege. He chose to be carried away. And when the defenders saw their strongest commander retreat, something in them cracked. Constantine felt the shift instantly, a cold dread spreading across the walls. "Not yet," he begged silently. "Not now." That night, Constantine gathered his remaining commanders and noble families. The emperor looked at the tired, pale faces around him, men who had once commanded armies, now reduced to guarding a dying city. He spoke quietly, but every word carried weight. "I know what tomorrow brings," he said. "I ask no man to die with me, but if you choose to stay, let us meet our end with honor." Silence. Then Lucas Notaras, the same noble who once said he preferred the Sultan to the Latins, stepped forward. "My emperor, tonight, I stand with you." Even monks and merchants pledged to defend their homes. It was unity, fragile, too late, but real. Constantine walked through Hagia Sophia one last time. Candles burned like stars. People knelt together, Greeks, Latins, soldiers, women, children, waiting for the storm they could not escape. He placed his hand on the ancient marble column and closed his eyes. "Forgive me," he prayed, "for failing them." Then he left the church, knowing he would never return. Before dawn on May 29th, Mehmed gave the signal. The first wave, irregular troops, charged into the breach, screaming and firing arrows. They were meant to die. Their only purpose, wear down the defenders. Constantine fought with them, swinging his sword like a soldier, not an emperor, but behind the chaos, Mehmed watched calmly. "Break them slowly," he told his commanders. "Then crush them with steel." The second wave, the Anatolian infantry, advanced with shields and discipline. They pushed closer into the breach. The defenders were forced back step by step. Constantine looked around and saw faces he had known his whole life, men exhausted, terrified, but still holding. The emperor whispered to himself, "If Rome must die, let it die standing." Then the drums stopped. A sudden silence fell over the battlefield. The defenders froze. And then they heard it, the march of the Janissaries. Elite soldiers. Feared across continents. Trained from childhood in discipline and death. Mehmed raised his hand. The Janissaries charged. The defenders broke. Ottomans surged through the breach. Flags rose atop the towers. Trumpets sounded in the Ottoman camp. Inside the city, civilians screamed. Some fled to the harbor. Others locked themselves in homes. Thousands crowded into Hagia Sophia, praying until the doors were forced open. Constantine knew the end had come. He removed the imperial cloak. He tore off the jewels. He was no longer emperor. "I am just a soldier of Christ," he said, "and today I die with my people." He charged into the chaos, swinging his sword. No one ever saw him alive again. The last Roman emperor vanished in the final battle of the Roman Empire. Ottoman troops stormed into the streets. Mehmed entered hours later, riding through smoke and rubble. He stopped inside Hagia Sophia. Sunlight fell through shattered windows. He looked up at the dome and whispered, "My city now." Then, in a surprising move, he ordered an immediate halt to violence. "Enough. The city is mine, do not destroy it." He knew what he had won, a capital. A symbol. A legacy. From this moment, Constantinople became Istanbul, heart of a rising empire. And the medieval world ended. The fall of Constantinople was not the fall of a city. It was the closing of the ancient world. A moment when legends became history, and history became destiny. Fade out.